Hey guys, I'm Sam Luce here with iZotope. In this video we're going to focus on mastering using Ozone. Not everyone masters using mastering specific workstations like Sequoia. Most people master within their DAW like Pro Tools or Logic. So in this video I'm going to show you how to master within Pro Tools to completely finish your track. I'm also going to demonstrate how you can ferry audio from Pro Tools into RX and back again after fixing any issues. If you're completely new to mastering, make sure you check out the mastering guide in the description, where you'll learn tons about the art and science behind this technique. Let's jump straight in. Mastering is of course all about mastering your bounced mix, which is why you only see one track here in Pro Tools and not a bunch of tracks. That would be a mix. I've got Ozone parked on the master bus in Pro Tools, which you can set up like this in your own session. If we go up to Track, New, then create a stereo master channel. You can call this whatever you want, but I'm just going to keep it as master. Then click Create. This will automatically give you your master channel in the Arrange window, which is a great thing that Pro Tools does for us, because if we want to automate our master channel later on, it's right there for us, but more on that later. Then, on the Channel Inserts section of the master bus, Pro Tools makes it easy for us to search for plugins in our library. I'm just going to type in Ozone, and this will come up for me, ready to select. Now we've set the table, let's hop in. Now the first thing I'm going to do here is run Master Assistant, which is going to analyse the sonic profile of the audio and suggest a good starting point to begin with. I'm going to select Modern, keep my loudness and EQ at manual. I'm not using a reference track for this. My intensity at medium, and it's going to end up on streaming platforms, so my destination will be streaming. When I click Next, Ozone is going to listen to my track and suggest a good starting point. Once Master Assistant has listened to my track, I'm going to want to make some tweaks afterwards to account for personal taste, but Master Assistant is going to give me a great starting point to kick off from. Aside from the processing modules in Ozone, it also has a great set of utility features that just make life easier when mastering your track. An excellent example of this is the gain match function. Often when mastering, we will be adding a certain amount of extra level to the track, and comparing a quiet mix to a loud master will stop us from being objective about our processing. Before making an A/B comparison with the bypass button, I'm going to put gain match on, so I know Ozone is going to output a consistent level for me to make an accurate comparison. Then I'm going to take a listen to how Master Assistant has shaped my track, before and after. Okay, that's done something really nice to the low end. It's helped it blossom and fill out the track in a way that was missing before. It's also addressing issues in the low mids using dynamic EQ, and it's dynamically softening some of the high end and high mids, as well as affecting some of the overall level using the maximizer module. The dynamic EQ and maximizer are working together here. The dynamic EQ is purposefully seeking out frequencies that are likely to make the maximizer work too hard, and momentarily attenuating them when they're likely to cause an issue. This means that the maximizer will be far more transparent and give us the increase in overall level without the squashy pumping characteristics that can often occur if we're not addressing them beforehand. Remember, we're accounting for the overall level increase using the gain match function, so we're only hearing how it is affecting the transients and not how much louder it's making the track. For my taste, I feel that a touch more high end would be beneficial to the track, to bring out some of the highs in the cymbals and guitars. The processing Master Assistant has applied is not set in stone. We can then dive in and really sculpt the master and add our own touches to what Master Assistant has given us to start with. Now that Master Assistant has opened my ears to how that bottom end sounds, I'd actually like to emphasize that a bit more using the vintage tape module. Remember, we set the intensity of Master Assistant to modern and medium, so it's not been too aggressive or added any of the vintage sounding modules to the processing chain. But just a little bit can be really effective. So I'm going to warm this master up with the vintage tape module. As the dynamic EQ, is already acting upon the issues in the low end, I'm going to make sure that my vintage tape module is after that module in the chain, but before the maximizer. Now I can start adding some warmth to my master. I've bypassed the entire plugin chain here to make the comparison, instead of just listening to what I'm adding with the vintage tape module. This is because when mastering, I really want to take a holistic approach and concern myself with the overall sonic qualities of the track, not just what one module is adding, but how my entire chain is sculpting the sound. It also allows me to be more objective about how I'm improving the sound of the track, and hear if there's anything else that would benefit my master. In this instance, I feel that the processing we've applied to the low and low mid frequencies have added some nice weight to the track as a whole. So now let's use a module that's great for tightening that low end. Low End Focus. With Low End Focus, we can affect and focus the low end in a few different ways. Punchy is going to affect the more percussive elements of the mix. Think about kick drums and low toms. Smooth is going to affect the more sustained low end content. Think bass guitar, low synths and the body of rhythm guitars. I feel there's a bit too much separation between the percussive low end and the sustained low end. Take a listen to the track and focus on the lows. How the kick is punching out, but it doesn't feel like there's enough support from the bass and low end of the guitars. I'm going to place this module before the maximizer in my module chain and decrease the contrast control on the punchy setting. This is going to decrease the contrast between the percussive low end and the sustained low end, effectively reducing the contrast in the level between the two. Then I can bring the level back up of the overall low end using the gain control once that contrast has been reduced. It's doing more than a regular EQ ever could, as it's able to detect different characteristics of the instruments within that low end spectrum. Let's use the handy listen button to hear exactly what effect this module is having on the track. I'm going to bring the contrast fader up and down. When it comes up, you'll hear more from the percussive low end, in this case the kick drum. When it comes down into negative figures, you'll hear more of the sustained low end, the bass guitar and the low end of the rhythm guitars. I can then use the gain control and bring up the low end that has now become less kick heavy and create a more solid low end for the track. In mastering, as in mixing, so much of what we do is about personal taste. So make sure to really analyse your track to make sure it's the best it can be. After listening through to my master, I've identified an issue towards the end of the track that needs addressing. It sounds like the drummer perhaps put a stick down on the snare drum or knocked the drum. Whatever the source of the issue, we need to make sure it's not in the final master, and we can use RX to resolve this. I'm going to use RX Connect to easily take the file out into RX and fix the issue. Then I can bring it straight back in. To do this, I'm going to select the final portion of my audio that contains the offending sound. Go up to Audio Suite, down to Noise Reduction, and then down to RX9 Connect. I want to repair this issue, so I'm going to go down to Send, and the audio clip will now open within RX9. Here I can see the part I selected within RX, and I'm going to use the zoom tool to zoom in on the section that I want to address. If I remove the waveform display, I can see the issue a little clearer. It's this orange signal here. Zooming in a little further, I can see the issue a bit better. I'm going to address this sound in a couple of different ways, but they all revolve around the instant process tool. If I have this set to gain, if I bring up my gain module, I can set the amount that I want to bring the certain section down by. At the moment it's minus 10 dB. That's going to be a good place to start, but it's going to mean that I'm going to take a few passes at certain sections of the audio. We could take a blanket approach to this and choose, for example, minus 30 dB. And if we then go to our time and frequency selection tool and simply draw a box around the audio, it's going to bring that section down by minus 30. However, it's also going to remove some of the ambience of the track, the parts here that are in black, and we don't want that. We don't want to be too intrusive in the audio. For that reason, I'm going to split this down into two separate parts. The first of which is this initial transient section, where we hear the actual hit. After that, we have the ring of the snare, which occupies a similar frequency spectrum, but is not as loud. We can tell that because it's not as bright orange. So first off, I'm going to go to my lasso tool and draw around the initial transient. This means that I can bring the loud section down by 30 dB. So I've removed that initial section. And then I'm actually going to take my gain down to minus 10 and just clear up the rest. By taking this approach, it means that we're not removing any of the ambience, any of the stuff that actually needs to be there, and we're just addressing the actual issue. Rather than being heavy-handed with one type of approach, it's often better to take a step back and use several strokes to remove the issue, so we can retain that natural sound. Then if I zoom back out, we're going to take a listen to that section before and after any of that processing. Now that we've resolved the issue, we can click Send Back at the top of the RX window. Now we're back in Pro Tools. RX Connect is telling us to press Render to commit the changes. We'll click Render, and it's been updated with that new audio with the issues removed. Let's take a listen. Once we've processed our master and got it to the point where we're happy with the overall sound, we can take a look at an often overlooked part of mastering that I like to call the top and tail. This is applying fades to the beginning and end of the track to ensure a smooth start and finish. Now this is highly dependent on the track you are mastering, and there's no hard and fast rule that dictates exactly how your track should fade in or out. But Pro Tools gives us a few handy ways to apply and visualize fades that make the process pretty simple. We can select the portion of audio that we want to fade using the selector tool, or, as I have selected, the smart tool. If you're using the smart tool, then you'll need to hover over the upper half of the audio region, which in the case of a stereo mix is the left channel. From there, you can draw a box around the section you want to fade. Then you can go to Edit and Fades, or press Command and F on a Mac or Control and F on a PC. This will bring up the Fades dialog. Looking at the slope section, you can choose between equal power and equal gain. They work in different ways, but ultimately it's a simple way of changing how quickly the audio fades to zero and how linear this fade is going to be. We can also change the shape of the fade in the Out Shape section to any number of different shapes or gradients. I'm just going to select equal gain, select the Out Shape to standard and click OK. The fade has now been applied. And with the Smart tool selected, if I hover over the centre portion of the stereo mix where the left and right channels meet, I have a fade tool that appears. I can easily change the slope of the fade to suit the track, and the waveform display will update for me to display how the fade is affecting the audio. It's worth spending some time in the fades dialog and learning how each of these fades will affect the track you are mastering. In this instance though, I'm going to listen to the fade I've applied with the equal gain fade and check out how my track will end. We can easily choose a different fade for our track and audition that against the other fade that we originally chose, just to hear how different fade types are going to affect the sound of the end of a song. Now I'm going to check out the start of the track. The start of this track just comes straight in, so no real fade is necessary. It is, however, good practice to trim the start of the audio file, to remove any unwanted silence, unless this is pivotal to the intent of the track. And now we can apply a small fade to the start of the track, to account for any clicks that may occur if the track starts in the middle of a piece of audio, no matter how quiet. The fades dialog is a great place to create your more typical style fades. But what about if you want to be a bit more hands-on, a bit more tactile and creative with your fades? Well, you can do this using automation, and I'm going to show you how. As we said before, once you create a master channel, it's created in the Arrange window, which is handy when you want to draw automation in on your master channel. We can select automation to read, and by holding Control, we will get a pencil tool. This means that we can draw in our fade that we want and make it as creative as you like. And then once we release the button, upon playing back, Pro Tools will follow that fade, in this case on its master fader, and will fade out in whatever way we have instructed it to do so, using automation. Now I'm happy with the overall sound of my master, as well as having applied fades to the beginning and end of the track. I can think about exporting. But before sending it off to its final destination, there are a couple of things we should think about, one of which involves us bringing the track back into Pro Tools. But before that, I'm going to export my track with the correct settings. I'm going to select my region and go to File, Bounce Mix. From here, we have a few choices to make. The file type will traditionally be WAV or AIFF, which in this instance are relatively interchangeable. Typically, we would deliver a master at full quality, so we wouldn't go to the MP3 option. With WAV selected, we can then choose the mix source. In this instance, it's the main output 1 and 2. But it may be that for your session, you've created some separate outputs, and you can select the output that you want to export here. Typically, we'll go for an interleaved format, which means that stereo left and right are combined into one stereo file. Mono would mean that the left and right channels are summed down to one mono mix. Multiple mono will mean you will get two files, one for left and one for right, which may be useful in some scenarios, but for most cases we're going to use interleaved. Bit depth will be the highest quality that it was recorded at. If we are dealing purely in the digital realm and it was recorded at 24-bit, then we're going to select 24-bit. And sample rate can vary from session to session. If it's going to be sent off for streaming, then the highest quality file possible should be delivered, typically at 44.1 kHz. If the session, however, has been recorded at a sample rate of higher than 44.1 and a bit depth of higher than 24-bit, then you should communicate with whomever will be receiving the tracks about the expected delivery formats. For the purposes of this track, 24-bit and 44.1 kHz is perfect. We can then check the Import After Bounce box to bring the finished master back into Pro Tools. We can select where we want it to be exported to and then click Bounce. Once it has been bounced, this will then come back into the session and we are asked exactly where we would like to see this audio file. I'd like to put this file on a new track, and the location, because the original master doesn't start right at the beginning, if I select Selection, it will align those two files. Then click OK. Here I can see my master in green and my original mix in blue. Importing your track back into Pro Tools is great for a number of reasons, one of which involves the View menu. If we go up to View, we can select Waveforms, and we see we have two options, Peak or Power. Peak is the traditional way of viewing the waveforms. Power is more concerned with RMS, an overall loudness level, and will be displayed differently. If we select Power, then we will see the overall RMS values of those original audio files, and we can see that they look quite different. If we zoom in on the files, we can see how our mastering has affected this track in a different way. If I zoom out horizontally, we will get an overall picture of the audio file. In our master, we can see that we are a fair bit louder, which is thanks to the maximizer. This is especially apparent in sections like this, where you can see that the overall loudness has been increased. And that's the RMS value, so that is the average level of the overall audio file. And finally, an easy way of doing an A/B comparison between your original mix and your master is to load up Ozone again and add your reference track. You can bring in the mastered track and compare that to the original mix. Here I've got the master track that I brought into Pro Tools muted, so I'm just listening to the original mix, and let's take a listen to how we've improved it. Now we've finished our master and we've compared it to the original mix. If we're happy, we should just do one last courtesy listen just to make sure nothing has happened in the export process. Open it up in your favourite media player. In Finder, I like to just press spacebar and hear my track, and we can be sure that we've got a master that we're happy with. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to see another DAW featured, perhaps one that you use yourself, then leave us a comment down below and we'll see what we can do. In the meantime, you can learn even more about Ozone and check out a mid-side video that I've done for you. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.